started doing business model innovation, started working with companies on business model innovation. We did the canvas and all these things, but there was always a little bit of frustration that it didn't quite work as expected. Now, and what was happening at the time was that we knew a lot about product innovation. We started knowing a little bit more about innovation in general, I would say, so going beyond product and service innovation. And what most companies try doing is apply what they knew or learned from product innovation and what the talk and the mainstream kind of thinking was around innovation to business model innovation as well. But as I said, my frustration grew stronger and stronger over time because we tried to apply these kind of things, but they didn't really work. So that's why I got more and more interested into, okay, so how does business model innovation actually work? And I got a little bit obsessed about the question, and that's where I got my PhD, my doctorate from Manchester Business School. So researching how actually do established companies transform their business model. So here, what's also important here is established companies. So I was not so interested in how startups actually do it, but I wanted to know how an established large corporate, how they change business models, how they transform their business models, and how they innovate new business models. So to kick this off, I'd like to invite you and put it into the chat, please. If you were tasked to innovate a business model as a consultant or in-house, your CEO comes to you and says, we need to transform our business model, what would you actually do? How would you approach that? So I'll just give you a couple moments here, and you can just put it into the chat. Please make sure that you send to everyone so that everyone sees what you're putting in. What is it that you would do? How would you approach business model innovation? What do you think are the key success factors to make business model innovation happen? Yeah. Well, I'm not seeing something in the chat. I don't know whether people are not putting it in or whether you need to publish it or.
Yes, I think we had a question, and I think you have other coming in, Mark. Can you see them now?
Yeah, define the core business intent. Yeah. So define the core. What is your business and what are you trying to do? Who else to engage? Okay, now, so I'm giving, while I'm talking, you can just put in stuff. Now, the thing is that, so when we're trying, where's the world going in technology? Yeah, so looking at technology. Now, the thing is, if we think about innovation, there are a couple of, let's say, rules or principles how we think innovation works, right? And so that's what I call here the four myths of business model innovation. And one myth is it's related to the process. Then we have the myth of trial and error. We still hear that quite a lot. So you need to try, you need to be ready to fail fast, fail often, all these kind of things. Then there is experimentation. So obviously, when it comes to innovation, we need to experiment. But there is different types of experimentation, and we need to be a little bit more granular about what type of experimentation we're talking about. And then there's a fourth myth, which is related to the value proposition and the focus on customer value proposition, I would say. So let's have a look at these one by one, and then I'll illustrate with a case study how a company transformed and innovated its business model. You see that there was another Q&A, the different trends, using data, inspire leaders to change, buy-in for innovation, culture change, can be the killer of innovation. Yes, obviously, we always want to look at culture, but there too, I'm going to share some interesting insights about how to or when to actually address culture. So, one of the myths that I came across is that when it comes to the process, Well, there is this idea also from strategy, coming a lot from strategy, I would say, there is this idea, you need to do a lot of analysis. So here we're talking about using data to determine trends, for example, looking at where the world and technology is going. And then based on your analysis, we do a SWOT and all these things. And then based on the analysis, you start developing your strategy. You develop actually your strategy. You might develop several options, and then you go into testing, and then you go into once you have validated an option, and then you switch from testing maybe to going into implementation. And that's still a very firm belief. Just recently, I came across a book by, or a very new book by two well-recognized academics who actually suggest that you do business model innovation in this way, in this particular way. Now, when I studied the companies doing or having successfully innovated their business models, I found a different pattern. So there is not really that analysis, development of different options and planning everything nicely through before you then go into testing and implementing. But what I see is a lot more of, they might have an idea, but then they start acting, and based on their actions, they actually learn what is working, what is not working, what do we know, what don't we know. They create knowledge through action, and they learn through action, and they use what they learned to design, to further design the business model. So not this analysis, development, testing, planning, or implementation, but really a bias towards action and learning from that action. And if you think about it, it's kind of, you know, it's logical to some extent if you say we want to create a really new to the world innovation. Well, there is only a limited amount of analysis or development and planning that you can actually do, because nobody has ever done it before, so you don't know what you don't know, so you can't plan everything through, you can't analyze everything, so you need to create knowledge by engaging in action. A second myth that's very linked to what I just said about developing different options, which then you need to test and you need to validate. So there is a myth that quantity before quality, or that you have to experiment with lots of different options to find the one that is actually working. You need to test lots of different options, which in reality is quite unrealistic. I'm going to share a case from a hospital with you. So there's a hospital and they transformed their business model. And if you just think about it, how could you, as an established organization, experiment with 3 or 4 different business models at the same time? It's just really unrealistic to do that, to be able to implement different business models at the same time to test which one is actually working. That doesn't mean that you can't experiment though. But the type of experimentation that I see is a different one. It's not a experimenting with lots of different ideas, so it's not kind of like a broad approach to experimentation, but it's more about, we have one idea and the experimentation happens on how can we make this idea work. So I think there is a subtle difference here between experimenting with lots of ideas or experimenting just with one idea and really focusing on how can we make that idea work, what does it take to implement this idea and to make it successful. The first myth is the myth about trial and error. If you work in innovation, you keep on hearing how innovation takes time, you need to have time for failure, and then you need to learn from that, obviously, but let's face it, nobody really wants to fail, right? And you don't want to keep on failing, and that's a lot of frustration that I hear from professionals, that I hear from CEOs, presidents, directors, and so on and so forth about innovation. They complain about innovation, that innovation is so focused on this trial and error, and that it takes so long to actually produce some success. So what I see here is, in reality, so these companies, the companies who are successful in innovation and in transforming their business models, they don't focus on errors, they focus on the successes. So it's about not failing and then trying to necessarily correct your mistakes or solve the challenges and solve your mistake, but it's more about where are you succeeding and trying to do more of where you're actually succeeding. And the final myth is that the obsession with customer value. And so if you look at lots of different models around innovation, there is always that, do we have is there a customer need, and then there is the product market fit, and it's really just focused on the customer value proposition. At the end of the day, if you really want to create a business model innovation or any kind of innovation that's successful, you have to obviously look at the customer value proposition, but you also have to look at the value system for the ecosystem that you're embedded in and the partners you're working with, and you have to look at the value proposition that a certain idea is creating for your organization and for your business. So that's the 4 myths. So we have the process, which is not analyze, develop, test, and implement. We have experimentation, not with lots of different ideas, but just with one idea. We have the value proposition, which should be for multiple stakeholders and the company, not just for customers. So you shouldn't just focus on the customers. And we have this idea of trial and error. Well, instead of doing a trial and error, we want to do trial and success. And I'm actually going to be a little bit more granular even when it comes to this trial and error and what to look for. And I'd like to illustrate how it really works with a case study. Now, I just picked one that I researched quite extensively, but the principles that I'm going to share, I mean, I have seen them across all the companies that I've researched and who were actually successful in business model innovation. Now, this is Clinicus London. So this is a private hospital in Switzerland. It's one hospital out of a group, and they were quite successful in transforming their business model. And just to give you some context, the transformation they went through looked like this. So when they started on their journey, so the hospital is a private hospital, so it was providing infrastructure for the private practitioners actually to do their work there. They had a few medical services that they focused on, very simple stuff, you might say, in terms of medical services. They were focused exclusively on private patients, and there was a sense that the whole organization as a private hospital working with private practitioners was very focused on the financials. And what they were able to do is actually they really transformed over the course of this journey. They transformed the hospital from a little bit of a sleepy hospital, as the managing director always explained it, to a world leader in having a hospital as an integrated system where they orchestrate lots of different activities, processes, resources, capabilities that they really bring together, which allow them to go full range when it comes to the medical services they offer, and also become world-class in highly specialized medicine, so brain surgery, heart surgery, really the highly specialized things that they can do. They also moved from only focusing on the private clients to public patients, and they have a business model that's a little bit like an airline where you have economy class, business class, and first class, and they provide lots of value to the independent affiliated doctors and also funding agencies because they focus not only on the financials, but they really focus on value creation for all partners. And the process that they and others that I researched went through looks a little bit like this. So there is inception. This is the stage where you just have the idea. As I said, you have an idea. You don't have a full plan. You don't have a full vision of what your business model looks like, but you have an idea of what it could be. Then you go into what I call evolution. So this is where you fine-tune it. And I'll show you the details of how that works for this London. And then finally, you come to diffusion, where we also go back to changing the culture, for example. So let's have a look at inception. So this is the stage where you see a need to transform your business model, and you also might see an opportunity, and you have a basic idea. So this is what that looked like for his London. So recognizing the need for the transformation. So they got a new managing director, and the managing director himself, he said, I'm going to do interviews with some people. So he interviewed in the first 90 days on the job. He interviewed about 70 people, figuring out what's going on, basically. and he was the one that said, okay, we'll just focus on the financials, so all we care about is money, so the patient is no longer at the center of what we're actually doing here, which shouldn't be the case for a hospital. And there was also, so talking about trends, like somebody mentioned before, there was a trend in Switzerland actually happening that it was this hospital list which they introduced. So basically it's kind of like a quality assurance from the Swiss government, and you need to be on this list to qualify to be allowed to perform certain medical services. And if you're not on that list, you can't perform these services. And the managing director at the time assessed that, well, if things stay like they are today, we're not going to make it to the list, and we're going to lose a lot of business, obviously, and that's going to be bad for our organization. So that's how they started. So he said there was a need here, and we need to do something. And then they embarked on the journey. And so actually they embarked on that journey in 2008, and then they went through, so transforming the business model was a journey of asking themselves and answering a couple of questions. And the first one was very generic in the sense of how can we successfully develop a hospital that's fit for the future, that allows us to provide services for all the parties, and that allows us also to be on this hospital list so that we can stay in business. And then they became a little bit more granular. So one of the first things that they actually investigated was, so why do patients actually come to us? So you might, I mean, if you hear that, it sounds like, might sound a little bit like a silly question, why do patients come to a hospital? Well, they want to get well, so they have some sort of condition that they want to have treated. But then you have about 200 private hospitals in Switzerland next to all the public ones. Why do they pick Yes London? So they went out, they spoke to patients, they spoke to other stakeholders, and they asked them, so why do you come to Yes London? And they had two insights from that customer interaction, if you like. The first insight was that it's usually not the patient who decides where they want to go, to which hospital they want to go, but it's a doctor. So it's your private practitioner, it's your specialist who says, well, I want to give you that treatment, but then we're going to do that at Yes London. So this insight made them realize that they need to focus on the doctors actually as their clients, as their customers, and not just on the patients. And that was a key part of the idea for the new business model, which I'll share in a minute. And the second insight they had was that what is actually driving the patient experience or patient satisfaction and referral rates afterwards, it's not so much the medical procedure, because that's kind of like taken for granted that is successful and that you're getting well. But what is really driving patient satisfaction is the whole patient experience, everything that's happening before and everything that's happening after your medical treatment. So that was the second key insight they had. And based on these two insights, they had a very basic idea. So they said, well, on the one hand, looking at how we looked at what is happening in the world. So in the world, we have two different business models when it comes to how to run a hospital. So you have the chief physician model, which is very dominant in Europe. So this has been called the disciplines factory. So it's very siloed. You have the chief at the top of a medical domain. So very rigid, but the advantage is that it's a little bit more patient-focused, although in only these silos, if you like. Then on the other hand, you have the more the US and private hospitals in Europe model, which is attending physician model. So you have private practitioners, and the hospital basically just provides the infrastructure, and then everybody can more or less do whatever they want, but it's really focused on the doctors, but you only have the rigid single doctor thinking, as it says here. And the basic idea for Yes London was, well, why can't we create an integrated physician system where on the one hand we have some elements, the good elements of the chief physician model, where, by the way, all the doctors are employed, and we have the attending physician model where we provide services or a good infrastructure, a good working environment to the highly specialized doctors who can do the brain surgery and the heart surgery and these kind of things. So kind of creating a mix of a chief and an attending physician model and allowing, based on the insights that we had before, allowing his London to be focused on the patient on the one hand, but also be focused on the doctors on the other hand. Now, this was the basic model. So really, when they started on their journey, the basic idea was just, we need to figure out somehow how we can combine these two systems. And it was really not more sophisticated like the slide that I'm currently showing you. So there was not, like the myth says, you need to do a lot of analysis, you need to do a lot of development, you need to do a lot of testing. This was the basic idea. And they didn't have a clue what does it take to actually implement this. But this is then where we go into the evolution. So now we start acting. Now, so based on this basic idea, we start acting. And when you start doing that, you're going to face a couple of challenges. So obviously here you have the challenge that, again, experimenting with new business models, well, you still have to run your existing business as well, because you can't just, as an established organization, you can't just say we're going to shut one thing down and then we're going to switch over to the new business model immediately. So you have to run your existing business model. At the same time, you're designing the new business model, so we run these two in parallel. And what's a little bit of maybe a contradiction, you might say, but a key thing here is actually you need to operate your new business model already so that you know what you need to design, and actually you need to design it while you're operating it. So going away from this idea that you can actually develop it on paper before you implement it. No, you need to operate it. You need to implement it to know what you need to design, which creates a particular challenge, I would say. And while you're doing that, you're gonna, so coming to trial and success, you're gonna learn a couple of things. So you're gonna have success in some areas. So it's not all failure or success, but you have success in some areas. You're going to encounter challenges in others where you need to keep on experimenting on how to solve these challenges, and you're actually going to learn and gain new insights that you can apply and that you need to apply them to the design, to the further design of your new business model. And so while you're going through these cycles of acting and learning and designing, obviously your the maturity of your business model goes up. So it's really a process of experiential learning. And this is what it looked like for his London, this iterative process. So as I said, they started with this idea of asking this question of, so what do patients expect? They learned that on the one hand, it's the doctors that refer them, so we focus on the doctors, and on the other hand, we need to create more satisfaction or a better experience across the whole patient journey. Then, so based on that, they had this first idea, but then they needed to figure out, okay, where do we want to play, if you like, and they asked themselves the question, so what are our good capabilities, what are we great at, what's our passion, what do we want to do? So they answered that question. They moved into, okay, but where can we make money, so what's driving our financials? And then, because they said we need to focus on the doctors as our clients, they started thinking about how can we organize and lead our key partners. So key partners here is about the doctors. They went back to the financials, costs, and then finally they also went into the key moments of the patient journey. So if you look at it, the key moments of the patient journey, it actually comes at the end of the process, if you like, and not necessarily at the beginning of the process. And this whole thing, so this whole process, it took them about 5 years to really, so this evolution of figuring out what is the right business model. So this idea of you can plan your business model and then you go test it and implement it, it's nonsense really, because you need a lot of time to actually fine tune it. Sometimes the companies that I've seen, they were faster, so they were able to do it in like 2 years, for example. But really, the minimum I've seen actually is 2 years of testing, of fine-tuning, of operating the model, learning what works, learning what doesn't work, learning where you need to improve, and then only once you've gone through these cycles and you piloted it, you're going into the scaling, which then comes a little bit later, in this case, after 5 years. So it's really about a constant process, if you like, of identifying opportunities and needs for change, formulating responses, and then implementing that course for action. And then while you're going through that process of identifying opportunities, formulating responses, implementing the course of action, there are obviously different dimensions that you would look at. And again, traditionally, from a change management perspective or from a transformation perspective, you might look at talent first, you might look at the core values first, but as I'm going to show you, what His London did first was really focusing on the organizational structure. So not focusing on the soft stuff, we might say, but really focus on the hard stuff, the organizational structure. So that was a key thing. So this is the organizational structure when they actually started, and then once they had this basic idea of having the difference between we need to focus on the patient and we need to focus on the doctors, they started reorganizing around that. The org chart is in German, but don't worry too much about it. I just want to show you how often they actually changed the org chart. So this was 2008. Then, based on this initial idea, they said 2009, this is what it looked like. 2011, they had the next one, so where they start consolidating. So they learned that some of the things actually work and some of the things don't work, and we need to keep on consolidating them. Further consolidation, so it becomes simpler, at least on the top level, if you like, still going on, and then they had, this is the actual last one, where they actually were able to take, so it took them from 2008 to 2014 to be able to really figure out how they can implement this initial idea of you need to focus on the doctors and the medical services, and you need to focus on the patient and that patient experience. And what you can see here, so you have the top box, that's the managing director, and then you have these two blue boxes, and that's the medical system on the left. So that's really focusing on the doctors and focusing on providing the medical services. And then on the other hand, you have hospitality and facility management. So they hired actually a former 5-star hotel manager to run hospitality services in the hospital and focus on the patient experience. So it took them 6 years to do that transformation in the org chart. And then only, also around 2013, 2014, they started working on the customer journey. So they first tried to have an organization in place that then allowed them to actually change the processes in the organization, and with the processes then also came the business model. So again, just the questions that they went through, and as I said, the initial phase was about 5-6 years, which was designing and piloting. And only then did they switch to what I call scaling here. So here now they started focusing on training everybody in the organization on the new business model, training new hires on what's so special about His London business model. They started documenting it more and more so that it really became formalized. So lots of experimentation. Sometimes the experimentation was only in some areas. So one key thing, for example, that they did is they wanted to create internal competition for certain services like radiology, for example, or the general medicine. And they tried to figure out how can we do that. So the idea was that the generalists, they need to provide good services to the specialist doctors, so to the affiliate or the attending physicians. And the question was, so how can we make them compete so that they create better services? And that took them a while to actually figure out how this competition could work. So at the beginning, they experimented with having 2 chiefs at the head of radiology, which really didn't work well. And then they had 2 different teams that provide radiology. Also, that's where the experimentation actually happened to make that work. And when, or how do you know that your idea is actually working? So this brings us to that idea of the value proposition. So the idea became really successful when they had figured out how can we provide value, how does our business model actually provide value to the hospital? And that can be strategic, from a strategic point of view, because London, with this new business model, was able to become a world-class facility. People actually came to work to his London. So there was, while I was doing the research, so it was around 2015 at the time then, where there was big news that the doctors were leaving the university hospital in Zurich, which is quite famous, because they wanted to work at his London. It was a big fuss at the time, but really, if you wanted to be recognized as a specialist in your field in Switzerland, you have to work these days at his London. So that's a strategic value here, I would say, that on the brand recognition, obviously. Operational point of view, financially, also his London has managed to become a very successful, from this sleepy little hospital on the shores of Lake Zurich to become a world-class facility. So obviously they also see that in the financials. They have received worldwide recognition. Mayo Clinic, for example, from the US, they came to Switzerland to see how his London is actually operating. On the customer value side, so really on the patient value, they really are focusing on the medical services, highly specialized, world-class, but also the whole customer experience or the patient experience, and finally on the ecosystem value proposition, so offering their partners the advantages. So here we're talking about the affiliated doctors, for example, the attending physicians. So you have to work at his London, so that obviously provides also lots of value for them. They provide lots of services and help these attending physicians to work together and to organize this. Now coming back to these dimensions, as I mentioned already earlier, the traditional transformation might be that you look at behavior, you look at talent, you look at the core values. But as I mentioned, also his London was really a lot more about, they had this idea of how to combine these two business models, and then they worked on structure. They tried to find the talent for the structure. So here there's also, there was a key challenge, because this medical system, for example, was a unique position in the world. Nobody had ever done something like this, so it was quite challenging to find the right person to lead this medical system in the organization. They had somebody did work, then the managing director of the hospital himself, he took over that position, and then over time he developed other people to be able to be in the lead of that position. Something that also happened, a lot of people left. So a lot of people left, and that's actually one of the learnings from the managing director. He said that at the beginning, they tried to hold on too much to the people who didn't subscribe to the model, who had ego kind of problems, because they lost some of their power in the new structure. So talent was a key thing. Then, once they have that in place, and there was, as you could see from the different org charts, a lot of iteration on this, then they moved into really, in the new organization, figuring out what are the processes. Once they had that, then they started working on the behavior, the knowledge, the skills in these new processes. So there was also one of the core tensions was, how can these hospitality people who were trained in hospitality, but not in medical services or medical care at all, how can they work together with the nurses? So that was a key thing, behavior, knowledge, and skills that had to build up here. And then, so once they had that, all of that figured out, that's when they started doing more training and actually working on the culture when it came to what's the specialty about his London business model, what does it mean in terms of values, in terms of attitudes, and culture. And again, as I said earlier, the big focus in the initial years was on structure, talent, processes, and only then did they move into culture. That's something that I observe lots of organizations in any kind of transformation, that they focus on training people, they focus maybe on the processes, but they don't focus so much on the structure, but it's the structure that actually makes it successful, or what is a key success factor. And the scaling, so that's what I call the diffusion phase. So at the end of the process, you're really going into that diffusion. Now, this was a process, and then kind of like the story of his London. And as I said, got many stories and many case studies of companies that have lived a similar process of this inception, having just an idea and then moving into evolution of that idea and finally into scaling it up. Now, a couple of things just to close this off from a leadership perspective. What is really important? Now, first is what I call here a clear new agenda. So top management has actually a vital role to play in this whole process. So the process that I described is London and other companies as well. CEOs were always very highly involved. So it's not something that you can kind of hand off to a team and then say, you do it and you get back to me. As a CEO, managing director, or a general manager, you have to be involved in this transformation and you have to drive the transformation actively. So that's your key role in here. But then you can't do it on your own, obviously. So also at his London, there was a core team. Some people didn't like the ideas. They left, as I said, but there was always 2-3 people actually who were a core team and who were also key on the motivation and driving it forward. So his London encountered lots of challenges while they were doing it, and at sometimes also the managing director, he had his doubts whether this was actually the right way to go forward. And then you had other people on the team who kept the motivation high and kept the project going. Provide direction. So coming to this idea also of change management or transformation has to be lots of bottom up and lots of involvement, yes, to some extent, but we also need a clear top-down direction and guidance throughout the entire process. And here the guidance was provided by, we need to focus on these questions like, why do people come here? What's driving our economic engine? What should the structure be? And so on, so that really around that structure that was provided top-down, that the transformation was possible. Also, clear top-down direction, so they established a very rigid meeting structure, for example, throughout the entire process, where on Monday, the top management would meet, and then on Tuesday, there were the functional or department meetings, and then on Wednesday, there were the team meetings to really be able to cascade things that had to be done down, and also then provide feedback, again, going up. So very rigid meeting structure that they established, which kind of fits into this idea of orchestrating the process. So it's really a very rigid, a very stringent process that they put in place. And this process, with all that meeting structure and then regular workshops that they had, that allowed them to really establish these learning and communication structures. So down communication, but then also getting feedback again up, and it allowed them to involve the organization through that process and that meeting and communication structure. And then do your homework. So as I said, they spend lots and lots of time on trying to figure out what do patients want, why do they come here, what is actually things that we can be really good at, what do doctors expect, and so on and so forth. And they obviously knew different business models around the world, how they work, that allowed them to create this combination of their business model. Good, so that was a lot of me talking. I don't know whether we have lots of questions, but so I invite you, we still have some time. If you have questions, just put them into the chat. If you'd like to learn more, there is an online masterclass that you can join, which covers business model innovation, but also strategic innovation for new growth, new business building in general. And we have a special ASQ discount code here, so which gives you 20%. So if you're interested in that, I invite you to check this out. You can go to my website, lucas.com/innovation, where you find more information on it. And with that, I thank you for your attention. I hope it was valuable. If you have questions, then please put them in here. If you want to reach out later, you have my email address there, and we can also connect on LinkedIn. And with that, Rhonda, back to you.
Thank you so much, Marc. Yes, I think we had a couple questions come back in. So thank you. Number one, thank you for your phenomenal session with us, and I hope that we have
Thank you.
Attendees just asking you so much information, but we have 3 posed right now. So we had one question come in earlier, and it talks about how do we really scope, from your vantage point and from your experience, we can go full organizational transformation versus very targeted digital transformations, just looking at operations. And, you know, could you speak to maybe the pros and cons in taking that, you know, the appetite level of the organization or the leadership usually, and then the ability for that analysis to shape kind of this business model outcomes and results that you're getting after today?
Yeah, so I think an important point you mentioned there is the appetite. And so I think so all the successful transformations that I have seen, be it transformations like as London, which is really the whole hospital, you know, it's a hospital with like 4,000 people transforming everything, or be it launching new businesses next to the core with new business models, the key success factor was always the appetite and the involvement of top leadership. So I have not come across a case that was successful where the CEO was not involved, at least to some extent, being really available for discussions, for decision-making, quick decision-making, up to really driving this and taking the leadership position of a new element of the business because nobody else was there who could do it. So high involvement. So I think that's kind of key when it comes to this appetite. Now to the element of digital. Now my thinking around digital transformation and digital innovation is that I see lots of companies doing it, but they don't know really why. So they do it because maybe it's fashionable, they think they need to do it. But the first thing is, I look at digital from two perspectives. The one is you need to have your strategy in place, you need to have your strategic objectives in place, and the question is, how can digital help you reach these objectives? So let's stay with the context of a hospital, for example. If you say, okay, we'd like to increase patient experience, we'd like to improve our employee experience. So the question is, what can digital do for that to make their lives easier, to help them to be less involved in the administrative tasks and all these kind of things. So looking at the strategy, what can digital do? The other thing is then, the other perspective is to say, okay, where can digital help us to become even better, to become faster, to become leaner, to become more efficient and effective, all these kind of things. And then the question is, so that's the first kind of thing. So it's more about using digital to become better, which is not necessarily yet using digital to transform your business model. I think that many organizations are not there yet to be able to do that. And here, it's probably, what I've seen actually is that you don't use digital to transform your business model of an established company, but you use digital to launch a new business. So if you think about the car insurance company, there's an example from Germany that pops in my mind, that comes up in my mind, where they launched a new business. So it's a startup which fully leveraged digital, and then they tested it in the market, and once they saw it was really successful, they kind of rebranded it back to the big corporate, so that you can see it's part of them, but they run it as a separate business. So yeah, maybe a long answer, but so two things here when it comes to digital. One is improving your business, helping you to achieve your strategic objectives, and the second one is really new business models with digital that are digitally or digital enabled.
Thank you so much, Marc. I hope that was enlightening to our question asker, and that they got that. You gave so much value and information there, and how to best approach it for the different initiatives that are on their plate right now.
Yeah, I think that's the key. So be clear about why are you doing it. I see lots of companies who are not clear about why do we need digital or what do we want to get out of digital.
Thank you, and exactly right. Outcomes, results, alignment to mission, and as well as maybe harnessing innovation and this exploration for a vision that they don't yet see. So I think you brought so much to that answer. We have, and that was from Carrie Bass. The next question is from David Seitz, and he is sharing that he is from basically drug manufacturers whom have a high focus on and requirements on regulatory compliance. And he's asking if you could really explore the role that maybe some best practices of how to harness and use innovation in an environment that probably is constrained from policy and practice and reporting in large way, shape, or forms. How might some of your prior clients or the ecosystem best support innovation in that type of environment?
Yes, I think and there are lots of environments like that. So being in Luxembourg, we work a lot with financial services, so there's also a lot of regulation around that, and obviously for hospitals and pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of that. So my thinking around that is, so the first question could be, how can innovation help to, how should I say, to kind of satisfy the regulatory needs in a better way? So usually the regulatory needs, they put a lot of burden on employees, lots of things that need to be done, lots of paperwork very often. Also, what can innovation do to help you fulfill your regulatory needs in a better way? How can you use data, for example? How can you automate some of that to be able to figure out where there's fraud going on, for example, or things like that. So I think that's a key thing, right? And then the second thing is, although there is lots of regulatory, in many industries, lots of regulatory constraints, there is always pockets where you can innovate, and it has nothing to do with regulation, really. I think that, talking about financial services, for example, there's lots of innovation that you can do that is not impacted, or where the regulatory environment doesn't really have any impact. If you're talking about improving the satisfaction of your customers, making your customers' lives easier, there's a lot of stuff that you can do that is not really impacted by regulation. And then even if there is, talking about online banking, so you have lots of regulation that has an impact there, data protection and all these things. But then again, innovation, and we spoke about digital, can actually help you do these things much better and much more efficient than in the traditional world. So if you just think about, okay, you need to go to just the other day, I worked with a bank in the Middle East, and I had to, so we have an engagement contract, and I had to mail them the paper copies. Right? So, and this has nothing to do with regulation. This is just not using the digital tools that are available to have a qualified signature in a digital environment, so that I don't have to send them paper copies. So focus on how can you make regulatory compliance easier. Where can you innovate around that using digital, for example, to make the life of your employees and everybody easier, and to be more compliant, maybe provide the data, for example, as one thing. And the other thing is, there are always pockets where you can innovate that are not touched by regulation.
Thank you so much, Marc. The second, maybe the thread puller there is David's also interested in the rate of innovation within that same regulatory compliance environment. What best practices or mechanisms have you seen that would, or maybe different structures or ways of doing business within that larger conglomerate ecosystem that can drive innovation faster and farther?
Okay. Yeah, I think so. If you're kind of like starting out on the innovation journey, I would say, and some people do innovation in just this way, is that you bring in outside stuff. So talking about, for example, the example of the bank that I just mentioned, who is still requiring you to do paper-based signatures and physical copies of contracts, you could start by bringing in best practices from others in the industry, or also from other industries. You know, what I always think about innovation is, because there's new to the company type of innovation, while everybody else in the industry is already doing it, well, we have to catch up. There is new to the industry type of innovation, which means that some other industries might be doing it, and it's a question of how can we bring this to our industry, how can we apply that, and that works on every kind of innovation, be it process innovation, business model innovation, customer experience innovation, what have you. And then there is the really new to the world type of innovation. So if you're new on the journey, start on this bottom level. Then when it comes to the structures, if I got the question right about what kind of structure can you use to foster innovation, I also think that it depends on the type of innovation you're looking for. So if you want breakthrough innovation, you need a dedicated team doing that. So for example, if you were a company and you have a core business and you say, we'd like to innovate something next to our core business to leverage digital, for example, or to leverage a new business model, you need a dedicated team doing that. You can't expect the people from the core business also do this, which we see a lot. I mean, there's a lot of people who expect breakthrough innovation from the people in the core, but let's face it, I mean, they are busy doing the core. They are probably working already at 120%. Now you put innovation on top of it, but that's not going to work. So you need dedicated people doing it. If, on the other hand, you're more looking into the new to the company type of innovation in the sense of we need to improve and we need to innovate, we need to bring in best practices, then that's something where you can really leverage all your talent, where you can ask everybody to say, okay, what are the ideas you have? How can we improve this? How can we be more customer centric? So here the structure is more, you need a team that enables the business, that helps them to bring ideas forward, that makes sure that ideas are aligned to the strategy, but it's something that can be done from innovation from everybody, if you like. So again, it depends on your objectives, and then you need the right structure below that helps you to enable these two different types of innovation. When you do innovation if you expect innovation from everybody in the company, something that I've started doing a lot is around being more differentiated about the types of innovation training, for example, that you offer. So far, what I see in most organizations is, okay, we need to be more innovative, and then everybody gets a design thinking training. But that doesn't help you because different audiences in your organization, they have a different role to play when it comes to innovation. So top management is more about defining why you need innovation, what are the focus areas, what are the objectives that you have for innovation. Then you have the middle management, which is more about really leading for innovation. So they need to be able to manage portfolios. They need to be able to facilitate or orchestrate innovation and take people through innovation processes. And then you have the practitioners who actually need to do it. So if you do, for example, design thinking training on the practitioner level, that makes sense. On the top management level, it doesn't make any sense at all. So be differentiated about how you enable the organization for innovation. I hope that helps. A lot of
yes, thank you so very much. So maybe one last question or a category of questions, Marc, and that's, when we think about business model innovation, you're talking a lot about new business startups, et cetera. And so we're seeing this global move towards entrepreneurship, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about what the trends you're seeing in business model innovation and harnessing that from an entrepreneur versus an intrapreneur standpoint, please?
Yeah, so what I see, and also if you look at the different surveys on innovation and what topics companies are actually focusing on, the big corporates are focusing or shifting a lot towards innovation in the sense of new business building. So there seems to be a little bit that for some people at least, or a big part of the corporates, it seems that they have given up on enabling the organization for innovation, and they're moving out of accelerators and innovation labs and these kind of things, but they focus really on business building. So kind of building new businesses on the side, which are then using new business models, which are using digital, like we discussed. So that's one thing I see. So that's one trend, if you like. So don't change the system, but build a new system on the side. The other trend that I see, though, is lots of companies, they're also going away from having innovation labs and having dedicated teams for innovation, and they're really building or they're working on building innovation cultures. So you see lots of companies where innovation culture or head of innovation culture is kind of popping up as a new title. So there is that kind of trend as well, where people say, no, it's not enough to build innovations on the side. We really need to make our core, our established organization more innovative in order to be able to succeed in the future. So that's kind of, I think it's a philosophical question to some extent. So I see these two approaches currently taking shape. I don't know which one is going to be the better one. I guess, again, it depends on what are your objectives, what is your specific circumstances. And then, as I said, to some extent, I think it's really a philosophical question. Those who believe that you can't transform your existing organization, you need to build a new one. And those who believe that it doesn't help you to build new stuff, you need to also transform your existing stuff.
Wow, that's all I can say, Marc, is wow. I hope that our listeners are just really hearing the gold and the value and the advice and just the potential ways forward. So I now would like to just thank our wonderful attendees and thank our wonderful speaker, Marc, for all that he does for innovation around the world and around the globe, being a thought leader, an author, a speaker, and just really sharing his experience and helping each and every one of our attendees know where to go for innovation resources, best practices, and of course, looking on Marc's website and following him for all of his phenomenal thought leadership. So again, a round of applause for a phenomenal speaker, Dr. Sniukas.
Thank you, Rhonda. And thank you everybody for taking the time to be here today. As I said, so I invite you, if you have any questions, just email me. I guess, Rhonda, you can share the slides, you can share the recording. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much. Yes, I will be following up after the fact so we can round out your package. For those of you who will be joining us in September and October, we have 923, 21st Century Requires Why the 21st Century Requires Collaboration, Innovation, and a New Style of Leadership with Dr. Bettina von Stom, and Digital Quality Leadership, A New Look at Change with Dr. Nicole Radzivil. So we invite you to, again, our September 23rd and our October 27th events for Innovation TC. Welcome you to join ASQ and ASQE if you are not already a member, and invite you to read our Insights on Excellence research published by ASQE. Thanks again to our phenomenal speaker, Dr. Sniukas, and again, we hope our attendees have a wonderful weekend, a wonderful rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you on our next ASQ Innovation TC event. Out for today. Thank you.